To analyze the causes of World War II, we need to look back to World War I. People across the world have said that the Great War, as it was called at the time, was the war to end all wars. At its conclusion, the punishing Treaty of Versailles was supposed to have rendered Germany completely impotent. The League of Nations was formed to prevent future wars of aggression. There were numerous treaties and agreements signed between different nations in the 1920s. What's more, the Senate's Nye Committee had convinced the United States government that World War I had been more about money than national security, leading to policies that established America's neutrality in conflicts around the world. In spite of the League being one of President Wilson's priorities, the United States never joined the organization, which consequently hampered its legitimacy as a global body. How did another world war, more destructive than the first, originate with Germany and go unchecked by the League of Nations? Why in the world did Japan get involved? And how did America find itself in the midst of a global conflict? President Wilson had said that the United States' involvement in World War I would make the world safe for democracy, yet within 2 decades, many parts of Europe and Asia had turned away from democracy and embraced one-man or one-party rule, and several of these leaders were not content to stay within their borders. Benito Mussolini formed the Fascist Party in 1919, and by 1926 he had complete control over Italy. Then he moved to re-establish the old Roman Empire by invading Ethiopia in October 1935. Yet the League of Nations looked on. Without a military force, they were unable to do much more than embargo certain exports to Italy. Adolf Hitler was inspired. After consolidating fascist power in 1933, Germany's chancellor tested the limits of the League's power. But nothing happened when he withdrew his nation from the League that year, or when he announced Germany's rearmament and compulsory military service in 1935. So when the League of Nations failed to stop Mussolini's expansion, Hitler turned his attention outward. In 1936, he sent 32,000 troops with air support into an area known as the Rhineland, a demilitarized buffer zone created by the Treaty of Versailles. What did the League of Nations do? It officially disapproved. Then Germany and Italy signed a military alliance in 1936, also in violation of Versailles. Silence. Germany and Italy both sent aid to the fascist leader of Spain during the nation's civil war, though the League had forbidden foreign involvement. In March 1938, Hitler's Anschluss, the reunification of Germany and Austria, went unopposed. In September of 1938, Great Britain and France, eager to avoid another costly war, signed the Munich Agreement, approving Germany's occupation of the Sudetenland, a German-speaking region of Czechoslovakia, because Hitler promised he wouldn't try to take any more territory. And then, for a few months, Europe thought that might be the worst of it. But Europe wasn't the only part of the world dealing with aggressive, ultra-nationalistic leaders. By 1931, China had been embroiled in civil war for 4 years, and Japan took advantage of this instability. In 1931, they fabricated an excuse to invade Manchuria and seize control of its resources. This reflected Japan's ambitions as a rising imperialist power and mirrored the foreign policy actions repeatedly used by Western powers throughout the era of imperialism. The international community did little to intervene until Japan invaded Shanghai the following year, where a large population of expatriates lived. When the League of Nations protested, Japan withdrew from the organization, and sporadic fighting persisted. By 1937, China and Japan were in all-out war, beginning with the capture of Shanghai. Quickly, Japanese forces moved in on the capital city of Nanking in 1937, and America evacuated its citizens. The U.S. gunboat Panay and 3 corporate-owned oil tankers were leaving Nanking with the last of the civilians when they were attacked by the Japanese Navy. In order to avoid a diplomatic crisis with the United States, Emperor Hirohito claimed that the sinking of the Panay was an accident and apologized. Americans, however, were further horrified by unspeakable Japanese atrocities carried out upon the Chinese capital in the coming weeks, an event known as the Rape of Nanking. The United States and other Western nations imposed severe economic sanctions against Japan and sent aid to China. These sanctions are what set Japan and the United States on a path toward war. The sanctions were the gasoline, while Pearl Harbor was simply a match. Japan was deeply reliant on obtaining resources vital to its war effort in China and its industries from Western nations. Over half of its oil came from the United States, and another 10% came from the Netherlands East Indies. Japan also depended on British Malaya for iron ore, while French Indochina was a source of coal and rubber. Losing access to these resources makes the Japanese decision to attack a nation with 9 times its industrial capacity